for two reasons. First, the L-30 was the first of the so-called super Zeppelins that the Germans built during World War I. The larger of Zeppelins, carried more bombs, had greater range, could fly higher. And the second reason was that although it had a very extensive career during World War I and many bombing missions, it was one of the few Zeppelins to survive the war unscathed. So we set upon the L-30. Horst gave me the plans. I sent copies of them to Sandy out here in Seattle. He did diagrams of the full-scale diameter of the bag at critical points where the gondolas, which I was going to build, were going to be attached to the bag. I did drawings on that and sent them back to Sandy so he could create hard points where we could connect my gondolas to his bag. And we built the Zeppelin. And then about 6 weeks ago, I came out here and we put my parts onto his bag, and that's what you're going to see down here at the end. And I haven't seen it yet, so I'm waiting to see how it's displayed. When I got back from my trip, I turned to Horst and I said, "Horst, I think we built the largest model of a Zeppelin in the world." He said, "No." He said, "No, that's not true." He said, "In Friedrichshafen, Germany, where I grew up, there's the German Larger Than Air Museum, and they've got a lot of Zeppelin models that are bigger than what you built." So that was a bit of a disappointment, of course. But I think Sandy and I can say one thing for sure, that this is probably the largest model of a Zeppelin in the United States that was built 3,000 miles apart by two octogenarians. Well, I'm just delighted to be here today and to have this collection in a place where a lot of people will see it. And my motivation in building this collection was to give the viewer a modicum of knowledge about these aircraft, which were the first aircraft in the world to be used in a major conflict. And when World War I started, I think the attitude of the leaders in the military arena of both the Central Powers and the Allies was pretty much the same, and it was summed up pretty well by Field Marshal Foch, the famous French military leader of World War I, when he said, "Aircraft are a great sport, but they have no role in military operations." Well, he made that statement about the first or second day of the war, and it wasn't more than about 3 weeks later that that totally changed. Because when World War I began, the Germans implemented what was known as the Schlieffen Plan, which had been drawn up by Field Marshal Schlieffen, who was the former chief of the German General Staff. The idea was that the Germans would invade Belgium and capture it quickly, and then move down to the southwest and capture Paris and essentially split France in half, and thereby end up with their immediate capitulation. When World War I began, Moltke, I think, is that correct, Horst? Moltke was then the German General Staff chairman. And they invaded Belgium according to the Schlieffen Plan, but Moltke was concerned that there could be a counterattack by the French into southern Germany. So he held back a lot of troops from the numbers which forces coming down on Paris were divided into a north and a south section with a gap between them. The French immediately mustered their forces using taxicabs and made a counterattack into the gap between them. And the Germans, in danger of being outflanked, had to withdraw and retreat, and so Paris was saved, and World War I ended in a quagmire of trench warfare. So within 3 weeks of the beginning of the war, aviation proved its merit. And as a result, aviation was concentrated primarily on reconnaissance in the First World War. Yes, there were fighters, and yes, there were bombers. The fighters received all the glory. They were the heroes of the media of the time. Fighters really had minimal impact on the war, virtually none. Bombers received some attention. Bombers of the era couldn't hit a ballpark in anything. The bombs they dropped wouldn't come within a mile of their intended targets. So as a result, when the Germans, for instance, were bombing, they'd fly over London and let fly, because the bombardier knew that his missiles would hit something, even if it was civilians and their property. So as a result, there were more reconnaissance aircraft types designed and built and flown during World War I than all the fighters and bombers put together. Yet, of course, the fighters and bombers got all the credit. So I really am very proud to have the collection here, and particularly proud that it can join the collection downstairs at what I regard as one of the, if not the best air museum in this country and maybe the world. And I thank the museum staff for the wonderful job they've done, and I thank the museum for the honor of letting me display these aircraft in this position. Thank you very much.
I think Sandy, our own from right here, I think we ought to give you an opportunity to
Yeah,
say
Sandy.
hello, and then let's
Talk about what you did and how you built it.
Ask if you have a few questions, get the two of you gentlemen to answer. These two octogenarians.
Thank you, Doug. I was in the store downstairs, and Mike Lavelle was in there buying something, and he said, hey, I just heard from Logan. I said, oh, how's he doing? He's fine, fine. He says, hey, you got a minute? I said, sure. So we went over to the side of the store, and he says, he's got an idea, and I don't know if you, well, let me just lay it on you. So he laid it on me, and I said, 13 and a half feet? And he said, yeah. So I was thinking, where am I going to build this silly thing? I go home, get out the yo-yo, and I measure the garage, and there's 3.5 inches between where the garage door comes down and the tail of what you're going to see in a couple of minutes, and about this much room between the nose of it and the freezer so that my wife and I can get in between it and get in the car and go to the grocery store. So it started, and about 600 hours later it was finished, and I didn't know it at the time, but I bought some British-made cloth that is put on model airplanes, and for you model airplane builders, it's the 21st century Coverite, which is heat sensitive, and it has glue on the back of it and so forth. And there are 25 gores of this black, shiny finish. And I was wondering, maybe I should put dull coating on it. And Horst was talking to Logan about it, and he says, they painted those things shiny. You know that, don't you? And Logan said, no, I didn't know that. Why was it shiny? And Horst said, well, the shiny paint allows the dirigible to go through the air quicker and without as much resistance as if it were dull, regular dull paint. Well, the cloth that I have on the dirigible is shiny, very nice and shiny black. So I'm down to the gnat's toenail, Horst. Thank you for your information and input into the building of it. It's built mostly of quarter-inch balsa wood. There is a shear wall that goes right down the center. It's the, if you were to see the outline that I had, the shear wall is identical to it. And it's a 16th inch sheet of balsa, and embedded in that are 12,000 K carbon tow. For those of you who know what carbon tow is, and those of you who don't know what carbon tow is, the 787 that we have out here, the several that we have out here that are testing as we speak, have a lot of carbon tow in them. It's a synthetic, rather than aluminum, they use the carbon and plastic. There's all kinds of carbon tow in here, so it's not going to wiggle and warp, and because a museum artifact has to last a long time. And I can guarantee, Doug, that 50 years from now, this isn't going to be wiggly looking. It'll look like it looks today. Any questions? The wonderful thing that we had, as Logan said, he came out here 6 weeks ago, and come here, Logan. He and I, we didn't look as nice as we look now. We had our t-shirts on and funny looking jeans, but he and I put this thing together, and there's what do you call those things? Outriggers? Is that what you
Yeah,
call them?
they're outrigger propellers, yeah.
They've got 5 or 6 or 7 points that go into the bag. And he said, how are we going to do this? And I said, sweat not. So I started making notes on the crate that's down in the basement, and I measured it, and I went up there, and then I drilled a hole, and I measured, and I drilled a hole. He said, you know what you're doing? I said, peace. So I drilled holes. I said, you do it. So he took this thing, and he went like so. We didn't have any problems at all. We did the same thing on the other side, and we went like this.
I heard some